Okay, so here we go with chapter 7. It was just as Father and Shane had said. The story Chris told was common knowledge all through the valley before the sun set the next day, and the story grew in the telling. Okay, check yourself, guys. Make sure you understand what story is Chris telling about Shane. Think about what happened in chapter 6 and what he wants people to think about it, okay? Fletcher had an advantage now, and he was quick to push it. He and his foreman, Morgan, a broad slab of a man with a flattened face and head small in proportion to great sloping shoulders, were shrewd at things like this, and they kept their men primed to rowel us homesteaders at every chance. Okay, I'm going to use the context clues. I've never really used the word rowel, but I think it's going to mean the same as harass or tease. They took to using the upper ford. Okay, that's a shallow area where you can cross a river. They took to using the upper ford above Ernie Wright's stand, riding down the road past our places every time they had an excuse for going to town. They would go by slowly, looking everything over with insolent interest and passing remarks for our benefit. The same week, maybe 3 days later, a covey of them came riding by while Father was putting a new hinge on the corral gate. They acted like they were too busy staring over our land to see him there close. "Wonder where Stark keeps the critters," said one of them. "I don't see a pig in sight." Okay, and remember from our last chapter, that was considered an insult, okay, to be a pig farmer. "But I can smell 'em," shouted another one. With that, they all began to laugh and whoop and holler and went tearing off, kicking up a lot of dust and leaving Father with a tightness around his mouth that was not there before. They were impartial with attentions like that. They would hand them out anywhere along the line an opportunity offered, but they liked best to catch Father within earshot and burn him with their sarcasm. It was crude, it was coarse. I thought it silly for grown men to act that way, but it was effective. Shane, as self-sufficient as the mountains, could ignore it. Father, while it galled him, could keep it from getting him. The other homesteaders, though, could not help being irritated and showing they felt insulted. It roughed their nerves and made them angry and restless. They did not know Shane as Father and I did. They were not sure there might not be some truth in the big talk Chris was making. Things became so bad they could not go into Grafton's store without someone singing out for soda pop. And wherever they went, the conversation nearby always snuck around somehow to pigs. You could sense the contempt building up in the town. All right, so contempt is a feeling of anger, dislike, almost hatred. You could sense the contempt building up in town in people who used to be neutral, not taking sides. The effect showed, too, in the attitude our neighbors now had towards Shane. They were constrained when they called to see Father and Shane was there. They resented that he was linked to them, and as a result, their opinion of Father was changing. Okay, so these homesteaders don't really trust Shane, and they're starting to question Joe because of it. That was what finally drove Shane. He did not mind what they thought of him. Since his session with Chris, he seemed to have won a kind of inner peace. He was alert and watchful as ever, but there was a serenity in him that had erased entirely the old tension. Okay, he's feeling at peace with himself. I think he did not care what anyone anywhere thought of him, except us, his folks. And he knew that with us, he was one of us, unchangeable and always. But he did care what they thought of Father. He was standing silently on the porch the night Ernie Wright and Henry Shipstead were arguing with Father in the kitchen. "I can't stomach much more," Ernie Wright was saying. Okay, and remember the character description of Ernie Wright? Okay? Remember which homesteader he is. You know the trouble I've had with those blasted cowboys cutting my fence? Today a couple of them rode over and helped me repair a piece. Helped me, damn them. Waited till we were through and then said Fletcher didn't want any of my pigs getting loose and mixing with his cattle. My pigs. There ain't a pig in this whole valley and they know it. I'm sick of the word. Okay, so they're getting under his skin, right? Father made it worse by chuckling. Grim, maybe, yet still a chuckle. Sounds like one of Morgan's ideas. He's smart, mean, but... Henry Shipstead would not let him finish. This is nothing to laugh at, Joe. You least of all. Damn it, man, I'm beginning to doubt your judgment. None of us can keep our heads up around here anymore. Just a while ago, I was in Grafton's, and Chris was there, blowing high about your Shane and must be thirsty 'cause he's so scared he hasn't been in town lately for his soda pop. Both of them were hammering at Father now. He was sitting back, saying nothing, his face clouding. You can't dodge it, Joe. This was Ernie Wright. Your man's responsible. You can try explaining all night, but you can't change the facts. Chris braced him for a fight and he ducked out and left us stuck with those stinking pigs. Okay, now that's metaphorically, right? There are not any pigs. Okay, metaphorical, figurative language. You know as well as I do what Fletcher's doing, growled Henry Shipstead. He's pushing us with this, and he won't let up till one of us gets enough and makes a fool play and starts something so he can move in and finish it. Well, fool play or not, said Ernie Wright, I've had all I can take. The next time one of those... Father stopped him with a hand up for silence. Listen, what's that? It was a horse picking up speed and tearing down our lane into the road. Father was at the door in a single jump, peering out. The others were close behind him. Shane? Father nodded. He was muttering under his breath. As I watched from the doorway of my little room, I could see that his eyes were bright and dancing. He was calling Shane names, cursing him softly and fluently. He came back to his chair and grinned at the other two. That's Shane, he told them, and the words meant more than they seemed to say. All we can do now is wait. Okay, so Shane has taken off to go take care of this problem. They were a silent crew waiting. Mother got up from her sewing in the bedroom where she had been listening as she always did and came into the kitchen and made up a pot of coffee, and they all sat there sipping at the hot stuff and waiting. It could not have been much more than 20 minutes before we heard the horse again, coming swiftly and slewing around to make the lane without slowing. There were quick steps on the porch and Shane stood in the doorway. He was breathing strongly and his face was hard. His mouth was a thin line in the bleakness of his face and his eyes were deep and dark. He looked at Shipstead and Wright and made no effort to hide the disgust in his voice. Your pigs are dead and buried. Okay, so think about what he means by that. As his gaze shifted to Father, his face softened, but the voice was still bitter. There's another one down. Chris won't be bothering anybody for quite a spell. He turned and disappeared, and we could hear him leading the horse into the barn. In the quiet following, hoofbeats like an echo sounded in the distance. They swelled louder, and the second horse galloped into our lane and pulled to a stop. Ed Howells jumped to the porch and hurried in. Where's Shane? Out in the barn, Father said. Did he tell you what happened? Not much, Father said mildly. Something about burying pigs. Ed Howells slumped into a chair. He seemed a bit dazed. The words came out of him slowly at first as he tried to make the others grasp just how he felt. I never saw anything like it, he said, and he told about it. Okay, so part 2 is going to have the story of what happened with Shane in town.